Hello everybody, and today I want to talk to you about an interview that I just saw, and I'm going to give some parallels to the interview to what's been happening with the United States. The interview comes from a KGB defector named Yuri Bezmenov, and which has happened during 1985. And he discusses about how the inner workings of the KGB actually is. He says about 15% of the time the KGB spends their time focused on espionage, but the other 85% is spent on subverting the American public opinion and changing it through a long and slow process to destabilize America. And he laid out 4 steps in doing this. The first step is demoralization. And this is meant to teach Leninism to students, and as those students get these concepts, they'll be entrenched and brainwashed in them, and then they'll go into positions of power, and then it'll be a never-ending cycle. They will not change their opinion no matter the views that they're presented. To get rid of them, then you would need another 15 to 20 years, which is about their time frame, to do the same thing, but on the right side of it. But, and he said what has happened since 85 has been going on for about 85 years, which lines up. In the 1950s, all the educational institutes were taken over by socialists, right? You had McCarthy talking about the Red Scare. Now there's communists within every facet of education and in Hollywood. And he was right. What we saw by the 60s was a complete mess. 60s and 70s, a complete mess of the educational system, in which we had a bunch of socialists and Leninists in the education system teaching new impressionable students socialist ideologies and saying how America was evil, demoralized them. And thus we saw, for example, look at Vietnam. Our troops came back from Vietnam, which some were drafted and forced in that position, but they were called baby murderers and monsters. You were able to change a whole generation completely. And the whole point behind this, though, was to get them brainwashed and to cause a destabilized foundation. The other key portion of it was to train them in that during wartime, you made them think it was peacetime. And they did this quite well. Think about it right now. The vast majority of Americans would say that America is not under any threat. We're not at any real war. Thanks to Trump, by the way, who did not send us to war in the past 4 years and been pulling us out of countries. But you train them to think that they're in a peacetime. So that way, the right, the conservatives, don't go fully active because they don't see the need to. And then the left keeps pushing their ideology more and more and more. Right? However, that's the issue, and that's what Reagan warned about as well. He says you have to always mow the lawn. Socialism is an evil that keeps growing more and more and more, and you have to always be vigilant for it. But we weren't. We didn't heed Reagan's advice, and demoralization took root. It's taken root today. Since the 50s to now, that's over 70 years of a country destabilized by a rotted education and cultural system as well. Media, Hollywood plays a big part. The evil, disgusting group of Hollywood, which has pedophiles galore in there, such as Weinstein, for example. This group held the power and holds the power, and they decide what happens in culture. And yeah, step 1 was easily accomplished. Step 2 then is the destabilization. And this takes about 2 to 5 years, he says, which they do not care about ideas anymore, but instead they wish to attack the economy, the foreign relations, the defense systems. Those are what matter. And that's what we see now, is we have a economy that is in tatters. It is, look at 2007, housing bubble burst, America goes down. China during this time is rising and rising and rising up. Then we see currently with COVID, the economy's taken a rough hit. Unemployment skyrockets through the roof. Foreign relations with China is at an all-time high, I would say. China being the communist threat that we have to worry about. And then the defense system, in which we're seeing the military shakeup occurring, and that'll be a future video in itself. But we're seeing, again, China on the rise. We're seeing an America that is destabilized, a culture that is torn. The past year, which leads to step 3, which he says it takes up to 6 weeks for a crisis to occur. But we've seen the past year a crisis in the United States. Every major city wrought with riots. Milwaukee, Portland, Phoenix, New York, right? All these cities are getting torn up by riots in some form. They started out as peaceful protests, a summer of love, as some would say, and then it's all come crashing down. And so you have all these incidences building up, a crisis occurring. We say there's racial tensions in the United States. That's the worst it's ever been, even though America's one of the most tolerant nations in comparison to, I don't know, let's say the whole Middle East, right? Or even Europe. But you have all these issues occurring, this crisis after crisis, and then we head into an election fraud that divides our country even more based on party lines. Election fraud that leads and culminates to January 6th, where Capitol Hill is attacked, and we're seeing the backlash now. Trump being banned, Ron Paul being taken off, Parler being pushed out, the right being attacked consistently. We're in a period of crisis, which is step 4, and helps show it a violent change of power. All these riots occurring consistently, showing that the Democrats are fighting back against what they perceive to be institutional racism, discrimination, and the government being bad, and they just have to be fought against. And then Republicans fight back on January 6th to try to fight back against Biden stealing the election, or so they perceive. And so there's this back and forth change of power, and people have died. There is a violent change of power. And that leads us to the period of normalization, as he calls it, in which you have a benevolent dictator. I don't want to say he's completely a dictator or benevolent per se, but just a weak person comes in. He proposes promises goodies to say that everything will become a paradise, that we will stabilize the economy, and that we will eliminate the free market, right? To kill the oil industry. Kind of surprises me that somehow Biden won Pennsylvania when he said he'd kill the oil industry, but that's a different point entirely. But he promises goodies, stimulus check, $2,000 consistently. Eliminate student loans. That's a big push by the left, right? That it'll become a paradise, that the economy will come back to normal, that COVID will be handled, right? The free market will get destroyed. We're seeing Parler again getting pushed out, a push away from Parler, and then that way Twitter stays supreme. And that Big Brother will be installed into Washington, D.C. It's been a slow grind, but now it seems to be more true than ever. With Biden goes, that means Kamala will be in charge, and she's as left as you can get. Look at her voting record. And as he talks about himself, your benevolent dictator will go to Moscow to kiss the next generation of dictator. Now, it's not Moscow anymore, but Biden will go to China, the new communist hub, to kiss the next dictator's shoes. Look at the Hunter Biden scandal. And he's right. You've seen the 4 steps in America come through. Step 1, demoralization from the 1950s to, well, currently. The whole youth, no matter what evidence you provide them, no matter what you can and can't say, is blindsided and firmly believes we live in a racist institution. We as Americans are at fault, and we're deeply troubled, and capitalism is evil. It doesn't matter that we've seen the greatest amount of prosperity, the biggest middle class the world has ever seen. It doesn't matter what evidence you give them. We are evil. We are inherently evil and inherently bad people, and conservatives are racist, fascist, bigoted homophobes. Doesn't matter that the Republican Party came out of fighting against slavery. There was this mythical party switch, even though the Democrats before the party switch stayed in the party and mentored Bill Clinton. Oh, that does not matter at all to them. It doesn't matter what the facts are or aren't. It doesn't matter the fact that Bill Clinton went on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. He is still a pariah. He is still someone that is a leader of the Democrats. He showed up at the Democrat convention for the 2020. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the facts. Doesn't matter that Biden is senile and he said some really racist, wrong remarks. Doesn't matter that his whole campaign got shut down because he was plagiarizing out of the wazoo. It doesn't matter to them because the orange man bad. That is what they've been taught from the school system. He said at the time, the time bomb is ticking and disaster is coming closer and closer. And it's true. The time bomb has went off, and now we fully hit step 4. And unlike him, he was able to defect from a horrible Soviet lifestyle. The USSR treated your people like shit. But he was able to defect to the United States, the greatest country in the world. And he got away. But where do we go? Do we go to Europe, which is crumbling underneath Islamic terrorism, Russia at the doorstep, and economic uncertainty in general, right? We don't talk about Ireland, Greece, Portugal. We don't talk about any of that, right? Let's just ignore those problems. The issue of the EU as a whole. Do we go to Russia, where they treat their people terribly and stone homosexuals? How about we go to China, where they oppress their people in Hong Kong and kill millions? We don't talk about the Uiguars because it doesn't matter to the Democrats at all, right? We don't talk about how they're being killed alive for organ harvesting. Not on the slightest, because it's orange man bad, and that's more precedent. Trump is an evil dictator that got voted out and agreed to peaceful transition of power and got banned off of the biggest multi-media corporations, right? That dictator, that's a lot of power he has there. No. Let's focus on the orange man bad instead of the real issues. We have nowhere to go. And it's quite the shame. He did propose a few fixes to it. What to do? Two very simple ones, which Trump tried to do at least one of them. Both of them, actually, I would say. The first was a real push for patriotism, that we need a strong national effort for patriotism. Make America great again, right? And that got lambasted. That shows how entrenched, how step 1 really took effect in America, because that got pushed against and fought against consistently. But you need some real patriotism in the United States in order to fight against socialism. But the second one we talked about is explain the real dangers of socialism to not those that are already against step 1, brainwashed completely. It doesn't matter what facts you show them. You can point to Venezuela, you can point to Cuba, you can point to the USSR, you can point to China. They'll just say it, but we can do it different. Democratic socialism underneath Bernie. No, instead you have to show to the new generation of people and then say, hey, look over there to your left, look over there to your right. Socialism kills, and you have to show them, you have to convince them the danger of a real forceful government, of a socialist government, and to take action and to stop aiding communism, to stop helping out China with lucrative trade deals, to fight against them on every single front. But we don't do that. We voted out the one man that was. Not saying Trump is a pariah, not saying he is Jesus himself coming down. He had his faults. He does have his faults, his Twitter and his spending, but he fought against communism. He fought against China, and that's something we need. And he brought patriotism back to America, where people could be proud of saying, I am an American. And we needed that. The two things he brought, we needed desperately, because we are already at step 4 now. We have the period of normalization where we have a benevolent dictator. This is following the KGB. Their whole guidebook on making America collapse and go socialist. We beat the USSR. China now took rise. They became the new communist centerfold, and they just followed along and watched. They're going to reap the benefits of the USSR. The Cold War was won by us, but it seems both sides really did lose at the end, right? he also does make a point in saying that the capitalists are selling the rope, which they will hang on, which is true. Capitalism is the best of all the flawed systems. Not saying capitalism is perfect, because it isn't, but what it does promote is it is the best. But the issue is you have these corporations that got too big and they just want to make more and more profit, and thus they choose to tie their hands with China. As he discusses, is that while that benefits them now, imagine 10, 20, 30 years when China's in charge and these companies say one wrong thing. Well, off they go to Alaska. Off they go to the gulag, so to speak, for speaking out against them. It starts with the conservatives. Well, rather, it started with the far, far, far right. It started with the Alex Joneses, because it was unacceptable. It's inciting violence. And then it goes to the conservatives. And then from there, it'll go to the centrists, the Dave Rubins, Tim Pools. People saying they're just going a step too far. And then it'll go to the left. And they'll eat their own, like they already are, by the way. They're not progressive enough. And it's just a slow, steady process. And you can only get more and more progressive until you're not. And that's where we are. So do please, you spent the time watching this, please watch the interview yourself and kind of look at the warnings he gave to us back in 1985. But here we are. We as Americans really need to follow through with what he said. Sure, 2020 was lost, but look towards 2022 and fight back with a fury, because we cannot give up. Because if America is to go, there is no other country that will take up the mantle. And I swear we will damn humanity to hundreds of years of doom. Because without America, what's going to stop socialism? Anyways, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please leave a like, do subscribe, share at least the interview with other people, because I think the interview is vastly important to be spread about. And as always, God bless America.